Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach to women, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. As we continue our path and exploring different tools and practices that will aid in our healing, assist in reducing and relieving stress, while also teaching us how to lean into self-permission, we turn our attention to emotional freedom tapping and the Heart-Brain Coherence Exercise. If you haven't heard of either, EFT is based on the combined principles of ancient Chinese acupuncture and modern psychology, whereas the Heart-Brain Coherence technique uses our breath and brain to slow down our nervous system, which enables your brain to synchronize with your heart's rhythm. Both are simple techniques with long-lasting, true scientific benefits. This week, we explore these tools with licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and women's transformational life coach, Catherine Ewing. We start with her own story, how growth called her as early as age 7, how she committed herself fully to her purpose, even when it meant striking out on her own. And then she walks us through the foundation of her highly viewed TED Talk, where she teaches emotional freedom tapping and the Heart-Brain Coherence technique. This is an up-close masterclass on relieving stress and anxiety with the tools you already have: your body, breath, and mind. Be prepared to find yourself entering a state of extreme relaxation and inner calm as Catherine shifts our perspectives and our ability to own our deep personal power. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. We are jumping right into this fascinating journey. Catherine, I'm so excited to have you with me today. And I know we're going to walk through so many beautiful techniques and really a masterclass on self-discovery, on life revolutions, on mindset shifting. But first, I have to know your why. So let's start there.
When I realized the traditional talk therapy was really not working for my clients or for me, I was like, no, this is not, I just don't feel like we're really getting to the deep work.
Right.
And then that was sort of, Spirit's way of kicking me onto the path of doing my own practice, my own healing. And, that's been ongoing. So that, that was literally in the mid to late 90s. I mean, I've been on this path for a very long time.
Wow, I love it.
Reiki training in 1999. And so, I've got a bunch of certifications and then called into a ministry program with James Twyman, the Beloved Community. So a very alternative ministry program that was about peace prayers, the reemergence of the divine feminine, and EFT was part of that. That was one of the last sort of modalities that I actually trained and got certified in. And for me, it was the perfect blend of talk therapy and working with the energy body. It made sense to me then. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so that, that is really sort of my go-to modality. I teach it to other mental health professionals, but also somatic work, just dropping in guided imagery, working with the breath, all of that good stuff that we now know.
Right.
Through all of the work of, Bessel van der Kolk and Stephen Porges. So,
okay, let's talk for like 5 hours. You have time. Obviously, there was a personal life revolution that started this all off. So what was that?
Well, it's interesting. I like to say first radical moment. My first radicalizing moment was when I started Catholic school in second grade. So I come from a large Irish Catholic family. I have an older sister, 5 older brothers, and then a younger brother who came along, 7 years after me. So we had moved from New York to New Jersey for my dad's work, and they were building the Catholic school. So I started there in second grade. And I remember so clearly the sister, the nun, asking us what we wanted to be when I grew up. I'm going to be a priest. like just very matter-of-factly, and smack down, like that wasn't happening.
That's not allowed.
And so I was pretty quickly put in my place and told that girls can't be priests. And I remember thinking, if my dumb brothers can, I certainly can. And at the same time, my sister had just entered the convent. So I knew I didn't want to be a nun. It's sort of like being vice president. Like, and to me, like, no, they don't have any power. They don't. How I knew this at 7 years old, I don't know. But so that was the beginning of the story. You know, I feel like I've always had a calling toward some kind of deeper spiritual work in the world. And then, of course, you go through life and you don't have those dreams anymore or whatever. So that was the very early, but I think it was I knew the seed had been planted. And then, I went through a series of personal losses. My mom passed away the day I finished college, 2 months before I got married. And then a few years later, my dad passed away 2 months before my first child was born. So I had this sort of mix of joy and celebration and loss and grief at the same time. So that seems to have sort of become a theme in my life. And I went on to lose another brother who struggled with mental illness. So there was some connection to, mental illness and loss and grief all along for me. Mm-hmm. I was very much drawn to, as I mentioned in our sort of earlier conversation, feminist movement. I mean, I was born in 55, so I was right in the midst of marching for the ERA, doing the whole thing. I was very socially and politically active in those years, head of this feminist union at undergrad and even as a graduate student. So I also always had this call to support and empower women. Mm-hmm. In the different ways that has shown up. And in the early days, it was, doing rape crisis work, domestic violence work, working with women in poverty, social and economic racial justice. So, a lot of the real grassroots kinds of social work and social activism. Never in my wildest imagination that did I ever, Danielle, think that I would end up as a psychotherapist. Mm-hmm. For me, when I was in grad school young, 24 to 26 or 22 to 24, some ridiculously young age. Right. And I had this, sort of ignorance about psychotherapy and thought it was really just for rich people who wanted to sit around and contemplate their navel. Woody Allen movies were really popular back then.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, no part of that.
I'm out.
I'm not doing it. Right. So I didn't. I went into, again, more sort of grassroots social work and then began having my own children. And when my daughter, who was the youngest, was born, so I have two sons and a daughter, while I was on maternity leave, I sort of started hearing this little message about going into private practice. And I was, oh no, it's just not happening. It's tough. But I wasn't really happy doing what I was on leave from. I wasn't sure I wanted to go back to that either. Mm-hmm. And the little voice in my head kept getting louder. And I said, okay, I'll look into this. And I called a woman. So for a while, for a number of years, I worked in child protective services. And my area of specialty was severe family violence and child sexual abuse. And I supervised that unit in the Hartford, Connecticut area for a number of years. So in that role, I did a lot of joint trainings with people who were on child protective service teams. And one of them was a psychologist. And we trained, prosecutors and police officers and first responders and even medical folks in the mental health aspect of what happens with children when, they're abused in any way, but in particular in sexual abuse. So I reached out to her because she was a psychologist and she was, pretty close to me. It was 10 years later. And I was like, hey, do you remember me? She's like, oh, of course I do. So we connected and she said, I'm in a practice now and with just one other woman, she's a psychologist as well, but we're looking to expand. So this is a perfect time for you to join us. So I did. I made the decision to join their practice. And it was a wonderful 10 and a half years or so full of a whole lot of learning, probably the most important of which was my realization not too far into that experience, that traditional talk therapy just didn't feel like enough to me.
Right.
It didn't feel like enough for my clients. It certainly didn't feel like enough to me. I wanted to go deep. I didn't even really understand the concept of core wounds and trauma back then, but I knew that whatever was going on in their lives day to day had some deeper, right?
Yeah.
Well, that it was bubbling up from. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to continue as a therapist unless I found some other ways to work with clients that felt more connected, less re-traumatizing, because I felt like just asking them to tell the story was re-traumatizing, not to mention the fact that the mind only knows what the mind knows, which is, as you know, 3 to 5%. You think of that iceberg image, that little bit sticking above the water is what we know that we know. Everything else is below that's why they call it the subconscious. It's below the surface. So they didn't have access to the things that were the core wounds, because those things were way down, pushed in the darkest, deepest recesses of that iceberg, right? So it just put me on a path of looking for other ways to work with clients that felt more respectful, more authentic, and also allowed us to do deeper, more meaningful work. And I don't mean to be, casting blame, anything on talk therapy, because obviously lots of people are helped by it. But for me personally, I felt the need to go deeper. And that took me on, my own journey, thinking I was looking for ways to work with clients, but we know how spirit works. This was really putting me on my path, right? And just as in grad school, I was not interested in the clinical, in the diagnostic and statistical manual, most of the things that the clinical side of it had to offer me, except for maybe the brain science. That stuff I can geek out about all day.
Me too.
So I found myself on a path of first increasing my own meditation, my own yoga practice, my own journaling practice. I started to notice that when I was writing, things were coming through for me that were not words that I would normally use, like beloved one, or I'm like, well, where did this come from? And then I started, I got trained in Reiki, which I think is, first therapeutic touch, then Reiki, which I believe Reiki is a huge door opener.
It is.
Like it just up levels, right? And opens up so many possibilities. And I found for me, I was trained in Reiki, practiced it for a while, taught it for a while, but it wasn't where I was supposed to stay, right? There were a lot of other things calling me. And so I got trained in, more modalities than I can count. And now I use them in an integrated way. I don't practice this or that or the other things so much anymore. So all of that along the way, got interested in, like Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza, even before The Secret, What the Bleep Do We Know? And really, Dr. Emoto and all of the powerful work around, how powerful our minds are, and, epigenetics and all of that. So that's, that's an area that I love. And eventually was drawn into a very unique and different ministry program. So for 2 years, I went through a program through the Beloved Community to become an ordained minister of spiritual peacemaking. And, people said, how did you even find that? And it's a pretty fascinating story. I mean, literally back in the early 2000s, I was being called to something, but I didn't know what. And, in the linear way of thinking, well, I already have a master's degree, so I guess I'm looking for a doctorate.
Right.
Like, doesn't that make sense?
Right, of course.
I already had the house in the suburbs, the husband, the 3 kids, the 2 dogs, so it must be a doctorate degree. And I'm back in the early days of the internet. It was so hard to search for anything, but I knew that there were 3 things that I was interested in. One was going deeper into peace studies, or, how we create peace. The other was the reemergence of the divine feminine energy on the planet. And the third was sort of law of attraction, manifestation, stuff that The Secret talks about in a very secular way, but I was sort of more interested in it from a mystical or a spiritual. And I'm online trying to find some university that would just basically give me a framework and let me put my own program together.
Right.
Good luck
Best
with
of
that,
luck. Best of luck.
Back in 2003, right?
Right.
Well, one morning the kids are still sleeping. I don't know what the husband was doing. The dogs were, at my feet. I'm on the computer early in the morning. And I see an email. I stopped the search after a while. It was just like going nowhere. And I went back to my email, and there was an email from James Twineman. I don't know if you've heard of him, the Peace Troubadour. I don't even know how I got on his email list, one of those things.
Right.
I start to read this email from him, and it was quite long. My entire body was every cell in my body was like vibrating, and I had tears pouring down my face. And, sometimes I can be a slow learner, but I said, I think maybe this is what I was looking for.
I found it.
And so we did. We started that program in January of 2004. There were 400 and something of us from around the world in what was for me the first of an online community. Like that was still, I was like, how are we going to do this with people all over the world? And it was super powerful. Our teachers were like, Reverend Michael Beckwith and Jack Canfield and Marianne Williamson, and like all of the who's who of people who were on the leading edge of, Barbara Marx Hubbard. I mean, everybody who's anybody in the world of conscious evolution were our teachers for those 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's see. Gee, we're up to 2005 already.
Well, I can imagine as you're moving through all of this, that there has to be some deep internal change that is occurring for you beyond just the conscious, subconscious level, soul level, which then must create sort of, let's call it an earthquake within your physical life as well.
Yes. Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, you can't do this work without having a lot come up to be healed and revealed, and, through all of this, it started to become clear to me, sadly, that my marriage was probably not going to stand the test of the vibrational difference that was happening. Because, on the vibrational emotional guidance scale, or the map of consciousness, right, every emotion has its own energetic vibration. So emotions like gratitude, appreciation, freedom, love, joy, they all vibrate very high. And then we start to, sort of filter down from there. And somewhere, 6 or 7 levels down, we hit contentment and then boredom. And then we sort of fall off into, regret, resentment, anger, depression, despair, guilt, shame. And as you do your inner work, you begin to raise your vibration. So you start to move up on that guidance scale so that things that you may have been a match for at an earlier time in your life are no longer a vibrational match. And so for me, I was happily married for 20 of the 30 years that we were together. And then the last 10 were more challenging. Actually, on 7/7/07, I had a very clear message that it was time. And that was right around my 29th wedding anniversary. I filed for divorce. And then my daughter, who is she's a free spirit. She's always sort of, blazed her own trail, found a way to go to boarding school and have most of it covered by scholarship and everything else. And the day we dropped her off on the way home in the car, I heard the words, "We've just opened the door. It's now your choice to walk through or not." Yeah. So, my oldest son was 21. My middle child, my other son, was 16, also at a vulnerable age. Yeah. Junior year of high school, all the stuff that goes on then with colleges and all of that. But my daughter was now at boarding school, and I didn't need to be there for her every day. 2 weeks later, I moved out.
Yeah.
And I went from my 2,500 square foot home in the suburbs and my, 3 kids and 2 dogs. And something also happened in my place of employment where I left that. I opened a healing center, completely went into, entrepreneurship for the first time ever. I had been in private practice, but that's not quite the same in a group practice. So at 52, every part of my life as I had known it for at least the last 30 years, marriage, family, children, work, some measure of financial security, life till death do us part, like all of that was turned completely on its head. And I was living in a 200 square foot basement room in someone's home. And the only thing that I took, because I moved out, because it was, ultimately my decision and my responsibility, and I was not going to uproot the kids or even him. So I moved out of the family home. And I took my daughter's twin bed and dresser and my personal belongings and pretty much walked away from the 30 years of life that we had built together. So, I became an entrepreneur. I opened a healing center. I was living in somebody's basement, going through all of the things that I just described, continued spiritual awakening. So, you're like, is this a spiritual awakening or am I just losing my mind? Because I can't tell the difference on any given day. It's a very fine line I'm walking here.
A tripwire. What's so interesting? I think that so many, well, let's not use the word I think. I know that so many women begin to really move up that vibrational scale, that emotional scale. We start doing trauma work. We start digging in. We start finding that soulfulness within ourselves. And we start looking around and thinking, oh shit, I'm about to lose every single thing in my life because it no longer aligns. And they get so scared that they stop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it was about a 10-year period for me.
Yeah.
From the time I really started awakening, because that was in the late 90s. And then I left in 2007, toward the end of and, I sort of mark, and, my daughter and I have talked about this because she had heard me tell that story about dropping her off at boarding school. And we had we were never completely severed, but we had some difficulty after I made that decision, and she was away at boarding school and I wasn't seeing her a lot. And she said to me, I hate that story because it makes me feel responsible for you leaving. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea that that would land in that way for her, that if she hadn't gone away to school, I wouldn't have left.
Yeah.
So that was, made me really sad, and also made me think a lot about what am I saying? And how can that be interpreted, But yes, so the 10 years of trying all the law of attraction things, trying the gratitude things, maybe if I'm just more grateful, if I be kinder, if I'm more appreciative of him, if I, accept him for who he is, if I, and you do all of that. And then when you're still not seeing, I don't want to say not seeing the changes, but when what my soul needed, then it's, oh my God, how can I do this? I made a commitment. I have 3 children. They're all going to be traumatized and they're going to end up in therapy. And, what if I ruin my relationship with them? So I hear you about all of the, permutations of those conversations that women have in their heads. And fortunately for me, I had a spiritual community around me, and I was getting clear enough guidance at that point through my journaling, and in some, I'd have a session with someone here or there that would say, it's okay. You never lose anything, right? And that was a hard one. What do you mean I don't lose I'm going to lose everything, right? But I do remember, and I want to give credit to, he was much younger than me. He's psychic who lived in California. We were doing a phone session, and he said 2 things to me. You need to stop explaining, defending, or trying to make him understand. your position or what you need, because he doesn't understand it.
Right.
And it's just, falling on deaf ears, not in a mean or judgmental way, but he doesn't speak the language you're speaking right now. So he said that. And then he also said, on a soul level, I see your children literally cheering you on. On a soul level, they understand that this is the path that your soul needs to take. Now, that could have been a whole bunch of bullshit.
Right. But it worked.
But honestly, I held on to that for dear life.
Right.
Okay, on a soul level, my children get that this is what I have to do. And he said, it's not going to make it any easier. There's still going to be whatever there's going to be that you have to go through. And honestly, Danielle, that's what I held on to for years, to be able to walk through that process. And now, just using the word walk, I sort of do this. Now I like to turn around and offer my hand to the women who are coming behind me.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it's to make a change in a relationship, to step more deeply into their purpose, whatever, is sort of on top for them right now, to heal trauma, because I still love doing that work. I'm still working as a psychotherapist in a small way, and then doing coaching, also doing a lot of the same kind of work, but for some clients who can only access me through their insurance or whatever, I like to be available in that way. So doing the deep trauma work, because I believe trauma and purpose are intimately linked,
yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Let's talk about that for just a moment, because that is one thing that you hit on that so many people reject. How could I go through this massive experience that really worked to define me, that almost took me down, that nearly stole, quote unquote, stole everything that I am? And you're telling me that's my purpose? I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, I want to preface it by saying I don't lead with that.
Oh, well, no, right? Because everybody would walk out the door.
Right. So it takes some time. When I'm working with clients one-on-one.
Baby steps.
This is my belief that every soul chooses a reason to become spirit in form for some period of time on earth. And in that choice, there's also the sorting through what's the most ideal set of circumstances, what's the best petri dish I can land in that will create the circumstances for me to step more fully into. And you may have come here to learn compassion,
right,
or self-love, or forgiveness, or gratitude, or setting boundaries. Like, there's lots of spiritual principles you could have come here. So if you've come from a really dysfunctional and abusive situation, you put yourself right in the middle of the best environment to learn self-love or forgiveness. And again, I am, not in any way meaning to downplay or, whitewash or anything else, the real pain and trauma and the effects of that on anyone. And I also continue to believe that it is a soul choice, that when we can, and I think this is why I was called to do the deeper work, right? This is part of my soul purpose, not skim. I'm not a skim the surface kind of girl. Like, if you want to sit and talk about how your week went, I can refer you somewhere. I'm happy to refer you, because that shit makes me crazy.
Exactly.
Unless we're doing the work, and I know there's always going to be ups and downs, but ultimately, so when we then dive in and do the deep healing work, a few things happen. We can step out of that victim consciousness. That all happened to me, into, that was actually happening for me. Huge mindset shift that takes time.
It does.
Right? I can still fall into the victim thing once in a while, but it opens us up to begin to say, I experience those things so that I can X, Y, or Z.
I love everything you said. In fact, it's sort of the joke in our house, although it's not really a joke. When my children complain about a certain circumstance, or our daughter Madison talks about her health issues or whatever, I'll always say, "You should have chosen better."
Not that I'm blaming you, but
I always say that to her, and she's always like, "Mom," I'm like, "No, I'm serious. You really should have chosen better. However, it gave you your purpose. So we can stop, we can stop complaining about it, right?" It's true though. You've made this move, you've learned all of these things. You're now moving into this purpose of really supporting divine feminine. What does that look like? What does it feel like? How are we nurturing this?
So the segue is perfect. So one of the things that I experienced when I went through seminary was that I was ordained. I was ordained on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. So I'd been hearing for many years that part of my purpose had to do with balancing the masculine and the feminine energy. Honestly, in the beginning, I had no idea what that meant. So ordained at the Sea of Galilee, and I have done my best to live into not only my vows that I made in 2005 as an ordained minister of spiritual peacemaking, of surrender, trust, and gratitude through the healing of the feminine. So that really has been, I work mostly with women, and part of the work is balancing those polarities within ourselves. And I believe that every bit of personal work is also work on behalf of the collective, right? Yes. As we each do our work and raise our vibration, we're literally raising the collective. I do my best to remind myself that this is a soul journey for everyone, and souls are eternal and infinite. And we are all at different places on our own journey.
Let's talk about how women can own their power. Let's move into that, because I think that is something that so many struggle with. Well, we know that they struggle with, and it is a fearful thing for so many people and a rejected thing. So,
wow, that's a big pool to jump into. I'm just gonna go where one of your words took me, which is about power. And what I am finding, not new, but I had a session today with another woman who appears, right, so confident, so powerful, so, right, in the world. And we did work on our 10-year-old today who feels unworthy and undeserving and fat, like all the stuff.
Right.
And so whether you feel like you have power or you don't feel like you have power in any varying degree, the likelihood is that there's still a lot that's held in your subconscious that's holding you back in ways that you may or may not be aware of, that is stopping you from stepping fully into the highest expression, your Christed expression, your, whatever we want to call it, your highest expression of yourself that's available to you in this lifetime. And so that's the work that I like to do. And again, it brings us back to the passion and the purpose, or the trauma and the purpose, because when we can heal the trauma, we can step into the purpose. And as we do our purpose, it helps clear our trauma. Like they're symbiotic, if you will,
interconnected.
Right? So as I said, I am trained in many, many, many different modalities, and I love and appreciate them all. However, the one that made the greatest impact on me at the time when I felt like I really needed to find a way to work with clients, and I was getting trained in lots of energy healing, I was doing a lot of meditation and yada, 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 and guided imagery, but I had not found something that felt really appropriate to bring into the therapy, room. Because when people come to therapy, they expect to talk. They don't want me to put hands on them or, clear their, fluff out their energy field, or, unless they've got an earache or a toothache, or, their anxiety is so high, and then we can do a little of that. But when I found tapping, or EFT, emotional freedom technique, it was like, oh, thank you, goddess, because it was like the perfect blend between talk therapy and using the energy body, literally tapping into the energy body to help move stuck energy, dense energy, what I sometimes refer to as trauma capsules, just like a time capsule that's stuck in your body, but where all of the, sound, smell, touch, feel, all of the elements of some traumatic experience are held in your body and then cause a blockage there.
Yeah,
right?
anchored
Whether
in there.
it's an emotional imbalance, whether it's an ability to speak your truth, whether it turns into a physical dis-ease, right? So for me, tapping was that perfect combination of using words, right? We have a formula, more or less. Even though I have this thing, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though, right, that thing happened to me, I choose to love and accept myself. So we set it up in a way where right even at the beginning, when we speak the truth, Danielle, and then put that statement of acceptance on the other end, already we're starting to change neural pathways.
Right.
Because normally we say, and that was so stupid, or I shouldn't feel that way, or,
right.
I don't know why I do that, or like we're immediately disowning, pushing it back in the shadow, right? But when we can just say, you know what, in this moment, this is true, this happened, this is how I feel, whatever it is, and I accept myself and my feelings. Now, a lot of clients can't go to the I love myself right away, and that's fine. You don't have to. We can work into that. I like to love myself, right? Or in this moment, I choose to accept myself, but just some statement that's something a level above, I'm such an idiot.
Right.
I shouldn't be feeling like this, right? And then it's like acupuncture without needles, right? We use our fingertips and we tap on these acupuncture points that are close, not only close to the surface, which is why we don't have to insert needles, because we can activate them right at the bony surface, but also the points that we choose to tap on with EFT are, well, let me just back up a moment. So acupuncture is based on Chinese medicine, right? And in Chinese medicine, there are subtle energy pathways called meridians, and each of the meridians is connected to a major organ, right? So the liver or the pancreas or the heart. So I think there are 12 different meridian systems that run through the body, and they have beginning points and ending points. So the points that we tap in EFT tend to be points where more than one of the meridians are coming together. So we're sort of, getting a little bit extra buck for our, money, if you will, because we're activating 2 or 3 of these meridian points at the same time. So it really starts to help the energy begin to move.
Okay. I know a lot of people use it for anxiety as well, not just trauma work or ways to calm down. I can see you tapping. Can you walk us through what an actual tapping moment would look like, where we start, how we do it, and kind of move us through that direction?
Sure. So let's just go with the anxiety, since that's really, it's common for so many people. And it's why a lot of people look toward EFT in the first place. It's why a lot of clients call me, right? Because their anxiety is just out of control. It's running their life. They're having panic attacks. They can't sleep at night. They're snapping at their spouses or their kids. Their minds are looping all the time with worry and fear and what ifs, right? So all the ways, they feel that uncomfortable swirling or tightness in their chest or in their belly, all the ways in which anxiety shows up, right? So that when I'm going to do tapping with a client, the first thing we do obviously is identify what we're going to work on. So if we're, in this case, it's, we're going to work on the anxiety. And then I have sort of a triangle where at the top is physical. So I would just check in with a person and say, okay, so, if you imagine yourself in an anxious state, where do you notice that in your body? So I'll get a little bit of information. A lot of times it's in the chest. It might feel like they're suffocating or they can't breathe, or there's some like a clamp or a vice, or it could just be this agitated swirling energy, right? That won't settle down. But so the first thing I ask about is the physical, because most people can relate to that without it feeling unsafe.
Right.
Oh, this thing, okay, I got, my stomach, like I get this pit feeling in my stomach, or, whatever it is. And then I'll just ask, and what are some thoughts that pop into your mind when anxiety is present, right? I'm worried about my kids, there's just so much to do. I can't stop my mind. I can't turn it off, whatever. And I'll take 3 or 4 of whatever the top thoughts are that day. So there's the physical, the mental, and then I'll say, and are you aware of any emotions that may be coming up around that? Because a lot of times people think their thoughts are their emotions.
Right. They do.
Right. I did.
Yes.
Nobody ever told me they were different.
Right.
So it helps to distinguish what's going on in the physical body, what's going on in your thought process, and then the feeling state. And they'll, usually identify a few feelings, sad or afraid or unworthy or whatever. And then I use exactly what they have just given me in the tapping script when we start the work. Because unlike in therapy where there's sort of inference and you're reading into things, and EFT is very straightforward. I am just going to give back to you what you just told me. I'm going to use, and I say this to clients, I'm going to try to use your words as closely as possible, but I'm not attached to these. If I get it wrong, or if you realize, oh, that wasn't really exactly what I meant, jump in, because I want it to be as representative of your experience as possible, because that's how the healing happens. And, I'll just, as I go into the tapping, I'll just say, I feel like half the healing happens just by me listening so closely, because being seen, being heard, being accepted without judgment is the bottom line. It's what we all need and what none of us got enough of.
Absolutely. It is baseline human need. Yes.
So I'm listening, I'm taking notes. Still to this day, I take notes because I want to be able to accurately feed back to that person what they said to me. I mean, I could make this all up in my head, because enough people have told me, but if they have a particular nuance or a word or a phrase or something, I want to be able to reference that and make it personal to them. So I'm listening in, I'm hearing what they're saying. I might ask for some clarification. And then when we start to go through the tapping, I am literally saying back to them what they've just said to me. And that, people have said to me, oh my God, it was like you were reading my mind. Like nobody has ever. And I say, you said those things to me.
Yeah.
I didn't have, right. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons I love EFT, because people can do it themselves. When I was trying to decide, EMDR, EFT, I opted for EFT because it felt, and I didn't know at the time really, but it felt like it would be more portable. It would be something that people could do for themselves in their own time. It didn't have to be during a therapy session.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons I love it, because once they get the hang of it, they can tap on their own anxiety. They can tap on their own fear, like the deep trauma work, work with somebody. Right. But in between, you have anxiety coming up, you have some thought from the past that's just kind of bugging you, or you woke up and you had a weird dream and the energy of it is just sort of tap on everything. Tap on everything.
Moving the energy is so huge and something so many people don't understand. As energy beings, we take and absorb energy. We store everything as energy. It's marked in our system. And so if we were going to do this for ourselves, what would that look like? Okay,
so this is what it would look like. We start with a setup phrase 3 times. Even though I have all this anxiety, and it's driving me crazy. I deeply and completely love and accept myself and all of my feelings. Even though this anxiety is driving me crazy, and I'm starting to have panic attacks again, I deeply and completely love and accept myself and all my feelings. Even though I have this pressure and tightness in my chest, and sometimes it feels like I can't breathe or like I'm having a heart attack. I know it's just my anxiety, but it's still terrifying. And I deeply and completely love and accept myself and all of my feelings. And then we just start tapping on the point. So top of the head, this terrible anxiety on the eyebrow point, this awful anxiety on the side of your eye. It just seems to be getting worse below your eye. No matter what I do, I can't get a handle on it. Under your nose, I feel so anxious all the time. Under your lip, my chest is so tight and I feel like I can't breathe. Outside of your collarbone, sometimes I feel like I'm having a heart attack and it's really scary under your arm. But I know it's just my anxiety. It's so frustrating. I wish I could slow down my thoughts. I wish I wasn't worrying all the time about everything. I know I can't control everything, and yet there's a part of me that's trying to control everything. And when I can't, my anxiety is through the roof. Under your arm, I'm exhausted because I don't sleep at night. My mind just loops around and around with the same thoughts. And then I get more frustrated because I'm not sleeping, and it gets closer to the morning. And then I get upset because I'm not sleeping. This anxiety just feels like too much. I wish I knew what to do. I feel like I've tried everything, and I just don't know how to manage this anxiety. Sometimes I feel like a freak. I feel so sensitive, so needy, so emotional. People tell me I'm too emotional. People tell me I'm too much, but I can't help it. This anxiety just has control of me. So even though I don't know what to do, I'm going to try this tapping thing. I'm going to just say what's true for me, that this anxiety is really hard and it makes me scared. And I feel so tired and the panic attacks are terrifying. But I'm going to do my best to calm myself down through this tapping, saying out loud these things that I don't usually say, moving the energy through my body, trusting my body knows how to heal itself, how to relieve this anxiety, how to find some space of peace and breath and spaciousness, some room in my chest for my breath to move so that I can feel calmer and manage my day and my life with more peace and calm. So just sitting in the energy of that for a moment. And without moving too much into the science of it or the, heady part, I do want to share that when we tap, even on the side of your hand, if you can't think of any of the other points in the moment, there are plenty of neural pathways in your hands. They're neural pathways. They go to your brain. And there's something about just tapping on the side of your hand that sends a signal to your brain, to the part of your brain called the amygdala, that is always looking for the next shoe to drop, right? What's the next bad thing that can happen? It's like the guard in the watchtower, always scanning, scanning, scanning. And as soon as it picks up on something, it sends the message to the rest of your brain to start producing the cortisol and the adrenaline. So if you can just calm your amygdala by tapping on the side of your hand, that would be an awesome thing to do because it turns down the dial on that amygdala. It helps you move from that sympathetic, the fight or flight response in your brain that so many of us go into as our default mode. And as we calm down the amygdala, even without all the rest of it, we start to shift over into the parasympathetic, which is that rest and relax or rest and digest. People call it different things. And it changes the chemistry that's running through your body. So we're slowing down the adrenaline and the cortisol, which we were never made to be running 24/7. It really is. Right. It really is our survival chemistry, right? I got to run or I got to fight. Well, we don't really used to have to do that so much anymore, but our mind wants to keep telling us that we do, right? There's danger, there's danger, there's danger. So just speaking it out loud, tapping on the side of your hand can be enough to just shift out of that sympathetic into the parasympathetic and calm your nervous system. You know, we know about the vagus nerve now. It runs through the whole body, connects every organ, right? It helps to calm the vagus nerve so that we can be in that rest and digest state.
I feel like that was the most beautiful masterclass of just release. It was beautiful to watch. It was beautiful. As you were going through each statement, you were tapping 3 to 5 times pretty much on each point and re-looping those, multiple places within the body. Would you mind just running through each point again as to where we're tapping so that someone can use that and get started immediately?
Sure. So again, the setup phrase is on the side. You tap on the side of one hand or the other. It doesn't matter which one. You can even go back and forth if you like. But typically we do the setup phrase 3 times. I like to say we're telling the universe what we're working on.
Right.
And we're sort of setting ourselves up and removing any resistance that our system might have, right? Because we're now, again, we're sending the signal that we're safe. So any part of us that wants to go, oh, can't do this, right? Is like, it's okay. It's okay. And then you're right, 3 to 5 times. Sometimes I stay longer in a spot, but that's all intuitive. And you learn that over time or you just feel into it. But yeah, so top of the head, kind of like the crown chakra, inside of the eyebrow, between the eyebrow and the bridge of the nose. So a couple of fingers there. Right in the corner of the eye. So not back by the temple, but right up by the corner of the eye. So it's all this bony area. It's all the eye socket. So eyebrow, side of the eye, and then under the eye, directly below the pupil. And then under the nose, under the lips. Some people call this the chin point. Sometimes if you'll see it abbreviated, you'll see CH, so chin. And then just outside the collarbone, you might feel some sensitivity. So you can feel when you tap there if you're in the right place, because generally our lymph nodes are a little sensitive. And then the final point is under your armpit, about 4 inches down. So for women, it's literally on the jawline, men, on line with the nipple under your arm. So, and I just loop through those points. Generally, people will do like 3 times and call it a round. I tend to be a little wordier. I tend to go a little longer, but, again, that's something you just, after you do it a little bit, you get the hang of it yourself. And the reason especially in a demonstration like this, I wanted to move us through sort of, the initial, here's the pain, here's the struggle, and then here's maybe some possibility that this could
right.
And then, okay, I'll just try this tapping stuff and see if this works. So I was trying to move us on a continuum. And normally I would do that over more time with a client. But I sort of wanted to leave your listeners, kind of on a higher note. So
it was very calming. It was beautiful to witness. I know that one of the biggest things when we step into something new, our resistance is generally the biggest thing that we're, dealing with at the moment, sometimes even larger than why we showed up to begin with. Yeah. How do we give ourselves permission to step into this emotional freedom moment, because that's really what it is. I mean, watching it, that's exactly what you're doing. You're releasing and moving. How can we give ourselves permission to step into this?
Even though I'm feeling really resistant and I think this is stupid and I think I look like an idiot when I'm doing this.
Tap, tap, tap.
What have I got to lose?
Right.
I'm going to give it a try anyway. Like, you don't even have to say love and accept myself. I'm just going to give it a try and see what happens. Right? Really? What have you got to lose? If you've been struggling with anxiety or with a health issue or, whatever it might happen to be, all right, even though I don't even think this is going to work and I'm really skeptical, I'm going to give it a try anyway and see what happens. And generally, if people feel even a little difference in their body, they're like, oh, okay. I find it's easier in the beginning to have someone facilitate it because when we're trying to do it on our own, we're trying to remember what to say, we're trying to remember the points, and it keeps us in our head, and it's not quite as easy to drop in. So, I have a YouTube channel with some tapping things. There's plenty of people on YouTube who are good EFT practitioners. So if people want to go and find, there's the Tapping Solution Foundation, folks I know from here in Connecticut because they were in Sandy Hook and I volunteered tapping with them for 2 years after the shootings in Sandy Hook. So, that's an app. I think, it used to be free. I think you have to pay for it now. So go to YouTube.
Lots of resources.
Lots of resources.
Right.
And just start to play around with it. Let it be fun. Don't get too heavy about it. Just go with the flow and, try not to be judgy with yourself. When I first learned it and started doing it with myself and then with clients, I did 10 disclaimers before, you're going to see this thing. It's kind of weird. And then when I realized 5 minutes in, clients were like, oh my God, tears are streaming down there. Like, I stopped with all the disclaimers because I realized, and here I am, 15 years later, almost, keep waiting for it not to work. It doesn't not work.
Right.
It works.
Yeah.
I just have enough experience with it and enough trust in it to know, even if somebody's skeptical, even if it doesn't work the first time, like, let's just stay with it for a little bit. If you're willing to look silly for, a few minutes or try something new or go out of your comfort zone, let's give it a shot.
What it reminds me of is how important, and certainly something I try to teach all the time, is the entire connection between mind, body, soul. If we can get our mind in the right place and open, if we can get our emotional body to calm down for just a moment and we can hear and listen and understand what's happening and then really connect in that physical sense as well. And on a soul level, subconscious level, all levels, that we have the ability to do the deep work that may scare the hell out of us.
Absolutely. The other thing I want to say about that is that tapping allows us to do the deep work without getting overwhelmed. I have had people come into my office, sit down, start telling me some horrific story. And I would say, would you just do this while you're talking? And they'll get to the end of it and they'll be like, maybe there were tears, maybe there were, a few moments of upset. And they're like, oh my God, I never told that whole story before, but it was like pouring out of me. And one of these was, an EMT, and years ago on Christmas morning had a child die in his arms from a house fire. And then on the way home got called to an emergency and it was his father having a heart attack. And, he was corporate, whatever. And he just came into my office and I saw him twice. We tapped together twice. I never saw him again. But for him to be able to tell both of those stories and release what he had been holding, all the guilt about going home to celebrate Christmas when this family had just lost their home and their child and, kneeling in the snow with her. And the story was just so powerful.
Right.
And he was a kid. He was like 20 years old.
Mm-hmm. Too much overwhelm at the same time.
Yeah. And, you know, if he could tell that story while keeping his amygdala sort of in that calmer space and get through it and say, wow, I've never been able to do that before.
Mm-hmm. That's the hardest part, right? For what we do is to allow people to dig deep enough that they are not overwhelmed, where they're not able to catch their breath, where they can't focus anymore and they just can't get through it. Is there other ways if someone says, well, that seems a little bit too hard for me? What would you say?
I would say if that feels too hard, I got something else for you.
Yes.
And it's called the Heart-Brain Coherence Exercise. This really only takes 3 to 4 minutes. I embellish it a little bit with a little sound at the beginning and at the end, but in the interest of time. So this is called the Heart-Brain Coherence. It comes out of the Heart Math Institute. Different people have their own variation on it. But let's do it, and then I'll spend a couple minutes at the end talking about what happened.
Okay.
Okay. Feet on the floor for who's ever listening. If you can put your feet on the floor, that would be awesome. And if you're comfortable closing your eyes or even just lowering them, just so we close out some of that visual stimulation. I'm just going to invite you to bring your awareness to your breath. And allow the sound and the vibration of the tingshaws to move in and around and through not only your physical body, but your emotional body, your mental body, your spiritual body. Like a little laser beam, allowing the vibration to just break up any blockages, any density, anything that you might be holding in any of those fields that are no longer serving you. Inviting you now to bring one or both hands over your heart, keeping your attention on the breath, perhaps even imagining now that your breath is moving in and out through your heart, like a very gentle wave that comes up on the shore on the inhalation and is then pulled back into the ocean on the exhalation. So just staying with that flow of breath in through the heart on the inhalation, out through the heart on the exhalation. Slowing the breath even a little further now by allowing that inhalation to stretch out to the count of 6 seconds, if that's comfortable, reaching that still point before it turns into the exhalation for another 6 seconds. Breathing in and breathing out. And I'll invite you to continue with that easy flow of breath as I bring in some high vibration words, and you can listen, or if you'd like to repeat them silently to yourself. Gratitude, appreciation, compassion, joy, love. Gratitude, appreciation, compassion, joy, and love. Just allow the sound, the word, the vibrational frequency to move in and around and through all your bodies, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, perhaps even imagining every one of your, I don't know how many billions of cells, just like one of those little dried up sponges, just opening up as it soaks in the healing and nurturing energy of these high vibration words. And just staying with your breath for another few moments. And when you're ready, allowing your hands to relax down into your lap or onto the table, perhaps bringing some small movement into your fingers or toes, even stretching or yawning to bring yourself fully back into your physical body. And then as you're ready, allowing your eyes to float open on the next wave of breath. And then when your eyes are open, just taking a moment to look around the room and anchor yourself back into your physical space. Yeah, I love this little heart-brain coherence, not only because it only takes 3 minutes and it's calming and relaxing in the moment. But the science that HeartMath and Greg Braden and others have done has shown that when we do this for 3 to 4 minutes, we change our brain chemistry for 6 hours. So that shift that we talked about before from the sympathetic into the parasympathetic, we are now flowing that energy for 6 hours. So the beginning, closing the eyes, placing the hand over the heart, slowing the breath, we're sending the message to the mind that we're okay, because this is the opposite of what we do if we're, agitated or afraid, right? Our eyes are wide open, our heart is racing, our breath is shallow. We're creating the opposite of that, which sends the message to the brain that we're safe and we can relax. And then when we add these high vibration words like compassion and gratitude and appreciation, we're lightening up what's called the enlightenment circuit in the brain. So we're, setting off these higher vibrations, neural pathways, which then adds, sort of supercharges this flow of energy for up to 6 hours. So if you do this a few times a day, you're sort of getting round the clock coverage for less than 10 minutes, right?
Yeah. It's like moving into deep meditation without having to do all of the extra breath work and calming and all of that. It was just really beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for guiding us through that. It's beautiful. Something that I have not done before. So a beautiful experience.
I put it on a voice memo. So I just send it to my clients so they can do it, for themselves. There's a longer version, again, with the explanation on my YouTube channel. But, they can go to HeartMath. They don't need to go to me to find it. It's out there. If they just look up Heart-Brain Coherence, they'll find it. The more women, the more people, but, in this case, women that we can support to really, just let go of what's not serving them any longer. It's really time to move into these higher vibrations. And I am seeing it every day in my practice. The last 6 months have been mind-blowing to me with how much is coming up for people, whether it's in a dream, whether it's a Facebook post from 10 years ago, whether it's somebody from high school resurfacing, like a song that they hear that brings them back to an experience.
Yeah.
Spirit is using every possible avenue to hold the mirror up and bring our awareness to that which is within us that is calling out for healing. So it's not, oh no, that again. It's like, oh, okay,
that
more
again.
Opportunity to heal, right? Come out of the victim mentality, come into right? This is happening for me. Here's another opportunity where spirit is saying, there's still a little something there that's not quite resolved. So let's just bring that to the surface and have at it.
Last question is, would you have thought this is where you would have been, when you first started your journey, or that 7-year-old who was proclaiming, I will be a priest?
It's kind of like spiritual chutes and ladders. That kid's game. You want to get somewhere, but you have no idea what all the detours and the ladders so I think I knew pretty early on, my soul knew that, there was something significant to do. And it's taken me, on quite a journey and doing a lot of things that, it's not linear. It's not masculine. It's like, first I do this job and then my work has been all over the place, but the themes that have run through it are working with women and children, healing, empowerment, spirit, source, divinity. So like those have been woven through everything in some form or another.
I can't leave without the 3 things. What are your 3 things? I have to. People are going to be upset if we don't finish with the 3 things. What are your 3 things that you either give great gratitude for or that you see working in your own life that are making a massive contribution as you show up?
So I would say, so grateful that we have the opportunity to take this journey.
Yeah.
Right? That, when I hold that awareness that anything is possible, it makes anything possible. I would also say, because I see so many clients who come from families where love was not expressed.
Mm-hmm.
I am so grateful for my parents, even though I didn't have them in my life for as long as I would have chosen. I'm going to cry, sorry.
Mm.
They loved each other, and that was obvious, and they loved us. And I am so grateful that I had that foundation in my life.
Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, that's 2. And I guess 3 is all the teachers who have shown up, whether they've shown up as, evil or knowing
Right.
that they've all been teachers for
Mm-hmm.
me. All teachers are not, unicorns and rainbows.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, some of our most important lessons have come through people who have challenged us or hurt us or, experiences that have been difficult. But the teaching shows up in so many different ways.
I couldn't agree more. I am so grateful for this connection, for your time, for the tools that you've handed to so many people who may not have even known that they had the ability to really tap in and move all of those things that are holding them in place right out. So I cannot thank you enough.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Some of the essential takeaways Catherine shared is that each of us has a purpose, deep inner power, and grounded strength that's waiting for each of us to meet it. While we often have experiences that are hard life lessons, or teachers, as Catherine and I both call them, ultimately, with the right tools, we have the power to take those lessons and use them as the foundation for our most heartfelt growth. If you would like to dive deeper into these techniques, I invite you to click on the show notes to be directed to Catherine's TED Talk or search Catherine Ewing on YouTube to watch recorded sessions of EFT, the Heart-Brain technique, and several other methods that she teaches. You can also visit her website at sacredheartalchemy.com. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to turn on notifications to be alerted each week when a new episode of the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast is released. If you're looking for daily inspiration, join our growing community at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, or you can visit getyourlifetogethergirl.com for additional videos, blogs, and upcoming events. Thank you for listening and being a valuable part of our community. Please don't forget to leave a review or a thumbs up, as it helps spread this message to others who may need it. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.